Officially recording, and welcome. This is Projectivity and my webinar to introduce some creative people, depending on whatever it is that you're into, introduce you into some of the business sides related to entertainment. So we are going to begin with a presentation. All right, let's make sure we can see that up on the IG. So I'm actually, all right, we're good, no feedback. So again, welcome to Copyrights, Trademarks, Royalties, and Setting Up Your Creative Business. My name is Stefan Barone, and this webinar is brought to you by Projectivity and our record label, Red Planet Records. Projectivity also has an in-person site here on Staten Island, New York. So if you're in the New York City area, we encourage you to please check out Project Lab, and these are all our socials if you'd like to follow us. We're going to get right into it. So once again, Project Lab is the location of Projectivity, even though we do events and activities all over the city. That's New York City if you're joining us from somewhere else. If you are in the Staten Island area, we encourage you to check it out. We have all different events when things are normal, and we're trying to keep it up with the webinars and web series. So we have a bunch of things coming up. Please check out for tomorrow. If you are a father, we have a free online class with Zoom where we are going over custom graffiti pieces for you and your child. Also, coming up April 21st, we have an event with Audrey Green Eyes. She is dope, does dope art, dope model. So please, if you want to sign up for that, go to projectlab.nyc for all the upcoming events. Also, we encourage you to join as a citizen of the Red Planet. That is our record label, redplanetrecords.com. You could go to that website and sign up right in that area. All right, so who is this for? Why are you joining us today? This is going to be applicable to anybody that has a creative passion and wants to start transitioning and making a living from their creative passions. So this is applicable to all kinds of performers: musical, dance, actors, actresses, songwriters, producers, graphic and visual artists, filmmakers, authors, basically anybody with a creative passion. And our agenda for today, we're going to do a little introduction of who I am, why I feel you should listen to me. Then we're going to talk about the systems that you should consider having in place before you begin on this journey. From there, we're going to talk about the legal protection of IP, which is like a major source of confusion for a lot of the people that I do speak with. So we're going to get into all that. We're going to talk about different revenue streams that are available and some other considerations. And then if there's anybody who would like individual conferences, once we're all done, I will be on the Google Meet to do some individual conferences. So who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, my name is Stefan Barone. I am the co-founder and CEO of Red Planet Records. I started the label with my brother. It is a limited liability company, and we're going to be talking a little bit about setting that up as well. I started out as an MC and a producer. I went around performing as a rapper. I would set up different shows in different cities along the Northeast. Originally through Facebook groups, we'd communicate with different people producing events, and then we would set up shows here in New York for them. So through that exchange, we got to expose our music to a bunch of people. I started out in high school making my own. Am I sharing my screen?
You're not.
No. Okay. So that is something we need to go back and do. Sorry about that, everybody. All right, we are going to start sharing the screen. Okay, let's take it back just to make sure everybody gets to see the pretty pictures. Again, you can follow us at Stefan Barone, Red Planet Rex, Projectivity, and Project Lab. And again, Project Lab is the home base of Projectivity here in Staten Island, New York. If you're in the area, please check us out. And please keep up with us. We have a bunch of events coming up. Once again, we have the event April 17th for any fathers who want to learn some graffiti art with their children. And April 21st, we have Audrey Green Eyes doing her event related to painting. This is redplanetrecords.com, where we ask you to also please sign up and provide your email so we keep you up to date with all future events and music. Again, This is for performers, songwriters, producers, graphic and visual artists, filmmakers, authors, and more. And we are getting right back to where we left off. So again, I am the founder of Red Planet Records. It's an independent record label. And I started out as an MC and a producer. And this is where we left off. So when I was in high school, I started making my own mixtapes. We made thousands of copies of CDs and literally just gave them out. I thought that was the way to make a name for myself. We did make the local paper. We had some events throughout New York City. And moving into college, I interned for Columbia and then Epic Records. And my job was in the area of talent scouting. So we were trying to find the next big artist. And this relates to why I eventually wanted to start my own record label. So I was lucky enough to work with some artists that you might have heard of now. One of them from Staten Island was BB Rexa. And at that time, I was trying my best to get her signed at Columbia Records. And there were people that I worked for that agreed that this was going to be the next big talent. But eventually the decision was not up to us. So it was that point in time, and once I saw the eventual success of BB, that I realized I really need to be in a position where I get to decide who the next big person is going to be and who I want to sign. So that's what eventually led me to creating my own independent label, and kind of brings us to where we are now. During this time, I also set up a not-for-profit organization. It's called Play It Forward NY. We hold free monthly support groups, and we're a resource center for children and teens experiencing bullying. Part of our philosophy is children need to raise their confidence and build a foundation of confidence, and that only happens through doing activities that are going to help them become more confident and make friends more organically. So some of those activities brought me to Projectivity, and that's why we started partnering. So Projectivity offers media and arts education, and they have a bunch of good programs going on for children and teens. So I became a teaching artist for them and a couple other nonprofits here on Staten Island. I taught DJing, I taught music production, and elements of the music business. I eventually, since I was brought into teaching, I became a teacher, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit about this and how you need stable income to be able to pursue your creative endeavors. So I am now a grad student at the Relay Graduate School of Education, and I'm a New York City teaching fellow. Okay, back to who I am and who the label is, because that's probably the most applicable part of today's webinar. We run our studio. This is my brother and I run Red Planet Studio here in Staten Island. That's our pretty little studio with a lot of our cool gear. And my younger brother is the debut artist for the label. His name is Stefan Barone, and I ask you please follow him. He's got a lot of cool stuff going on. So, what has the label done? Why should you listen to me in this webinar today? These numbers are cool. I put them here because it grabs a lot of people's attention, but I'm going to speak a little bit about why these numbers don't matter and why there's other things that are more important. But just in case you value this, his debut single, same thing, currently boasts over 500,000 streams across all platforms. And his music video is probably closer to 90,000 views today. His second single has over 184,000 streams across all platforms, and that's with our good friend VR. He currently has over 20,000 followers on Instagram. That's cool. It's a modest amount, right? Still got a way to go, but it's still a decent amount considering where we started from and what we are building to. The performances that we do, live performances, the local ones here on Staten Island, we get over 100 guests in attendance. In the New York City area, usually Manhattan, when we have paid ticket sales, he's getting about 50 paid tickets per show. And this was one of our cool shows with Projectivity here on Staten Island at 50/50 Skate Park. So every year, Projectivity does an event called Musication to raise money for arts and education in Staten Island. And they did this in the skate park, and we got to do a really cool show. So that's my younger brother Jordan performing for Projectivity's event Musication at 50/50 Skate Park. We also got him a couple of features and appearances. He got to perform at iHeartRadio. We have someone who treats us very well at Hot 97, DJ Stacks, had us up there, and got some interviews also with some blogs like Pop Dust. They were very good to us. So full disclosure for this webinar, I am not an entertainment lawyer. I am not an expert on legal matters, but I am somebody who has had to traverse and navigate this musical industry and creative industry myself and learn these things for myself along with my younger brother to help him out. So we had to learn what goes into these agreements, what different copyrights are, what different trademarks are. So a lot of what I learned and what I'm going to be sharing with you here today is going to be based on things that I learned in some really key essential programs that I highly recommend everybody takes a second to look into. So on Mac Pro Video, it's a website that you could pay for a subscription for. It's now owned, I believe, by Ask Video. There's a really good program by someone named Paul Bissell. He's got about 4 different courses on entertainment law. First one is about copyright and mechanical royalties. And then there's a really great book called All You Need to Know About the Music Business. I'm pretty sure if you ask a lot of industry professionals, they will recommend definitely the book I know most people have heard of, but this program on Mac Pro Video by Paul Bissell was also extremely great for me navigating and learning how to deal with a lot of the legal jargon and learning what we needed to do to protect ourselves. So that gets the introduction out of the way. Next part, we're going to talk about the different systems that I feel you should have in place as far as creating a foundation for you to build off of. There's certain things that are going to make your life way easier. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is money. You're going to need money to do all the things that you want to do with your creative endeavors. You're going to need money to supply your craft, whether you're a painter or you want to get into film. You're going to need money for camera, for supplies. If it's music, you're going to see a lot of things that we talk about require money to register your copyrights. All this stuff requires money. So please, no illusions. Do not kid yourself. You will need a job, and hopefully you can find a job that makes money that's within your field. But if not, you're going to have to take any kind of job that you can to be able to pay for it. Having stable income is definitely a priority. So I know a lot of people are going through it right now. It's really hard. If I hadn't had taken the teaching job this year, I would really be scrambling to find where my next dollar is coming from. So having that stable income is definitely a priority, and it's basic psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need to be able to pay for food and shelter before you could think about anything else creative, right? It's going to get in the way of being creative if you're constantly worrying about the bare essentials. What I will say about this is aim for a job that makes the highest amount of money in the shortest amount of time. Jobs like that are shooting videos for weddings or DJing weddings, which I'm going to get to in a second, right? These things that really take up maybe a day's worth of time, but could hopefully supply your income for the rest of the week. Not always stable though. Like right now, I work as a DJ, but right now it's definitely dead because of what's going on. So definitely having stable income and try to aim for something that's going to make a lot of money in a short amount of time so that you have the rest of the week for your craft. Which brings me to what I normally do in normal circumstances. I work as a DJ and event producer. Still in lines of music, but it's basically, I treat it almost as a day job, even though it's working most weekends, right? And through that, sometimes I do get to meet some cool people, but this is one way I make a lot of money in a short amount of time. Also, things to consider for these basics. You're going to need equipment to do whatever it is that you want to do that's related to being creative. So, I'm going to be speaking more from the musical side, but I do know of other stores and digital places where you could get a 0% financing. This is going to help you get the tools that you need for your craft in the shortest amount of time. So, I put this example up of this vocalist package, right? This is the one that we recommend to people. It's definitely a good budget microphone and does a really good job. So $335. That's pretty difficult to come up with if you're living from paycheck to paycheck. But what is more doable is $14 a month over 24 months. And sometimes Sweetwater has special deals where they break it up even over 36 months or 48 months. So this is a more manageable way to get the equipment that you need now instead of having to wait and save up for it. Also, anytime you see something highlighted in green, that is one of our favorites. So that is something that I'm recommending to you if you see it highlighted in green. Other places for film, even for DJ equipment, right, is B&H. Adorama is another place, and you could also rent. So the camera that we use to shoot Jordan's music video, It's normally like a $10,000 camera, but we rented it for the weekend for $400. That was more manageable than me coming up with $10,000, right? So these are my recommendations: is check the places that sell the equipment that you need and find out how you could make it more manageable. 0% financing is always great, which also leads me to discussing computers. I highly recommend Mac computers, especially if you're going to do anything related to media, whether it's images, video, music. It seems Mac works a little bit more efficiently for me. That's my experience. And most Apple stores, I believe, have 18-month financing. So that's a quick way to get your computer that you need. So, relates to all the pretty gear, and that's just me showing off. That's our little studio that we work from, and that was the way that we were able to get some of our gear. Some of it we've had really great mentors. Shout out to Kalodro, who actually lent us some of his gear, and then the rest of it we've had to finance, and we are paying probably close to the equivalent of a mortgage for that gear. But eventually, we can make money from it, recording people, and we get to save money instead of paying for a studio ourselves. We get to have the studio 24/7. Another thing to consider at these beginning stages is what program are you going to work with? My suggestion is, doesn't really matter which one. Each program has its pros and its cons, but if you learn the ins and outs of that program, really learn everything there is to learn about that program, that is more important than the program that you select. But if you're looking for some free options, if you get a Mac computer, there is GarageBand. Really great way to jump into music very quickly without even knowing a lot of music theory. It has something called Apple Loops. And if you eventually want to graduate from GarageBand, there's Logic is the next step. We have some good friends over at Projectivity, and they use Logic most of the time. Also on your phone, cheap options: Fruity Loops. Well, now it's called FL Studio Mobile. I've made some really cool beats on FL Studio Mobile. I believe the app is now $15 or $20. The industry standard in most major recording studios still is Pro Tools, and that is what my younger brother Jordan, who's an artist and also an audio engineer, this is what he works with, and this is most studios that you go to are going to be working off Pro Tools. Jordan and I now use Ableton Live for production. This is one of our favorites. You could do a lot of really cool stuff with it, but I know some people find it difficult to learn. We find it really easy to jump into, and it does almost everything that we could think of that we would want it to do. I initially started out with Fruity Loops, and this is what a lot of producers like and enjoy. We also have this at Projectivity. There's also Adobe Photoshop if you're into photography, and Adobe Illustrator if you are into making digital art. So again, last statement I want to make about that is, doesn't really matter which program you choose, just make sure that you learn everything there is to know about it, and there's always courses on Mac Pro Video, and you can find a lot of good stuff on YouTube as well. So now we get into Google Drive and file management. There's a lot of different cloud-based services that host files, but I do like Google Drive because of its integration with Google Docs, Google Sheets, just really easy to collaborate. My brother and I don't live together, but we work a lot on our files, our accounting, and this is the easiest way to collaborate with each other. We don't have to worry about who has Microsoft Office. Google Drive has been the easiest way to jump into it and has really cheap cloud hosting services. So I think we pay $20 for the year for a terabyte. And then you're going to want backup for all your files as well. So we really like the Lacy Rugged drives, and they have all different options for USB or USB-C, and you could also finance it through Sweetwater. So that was a way that we bought it. I know I'm sharing my screen right now, but on the other side I'm also holding up my Lacy drive. And so this relates to, especially in the world of video, Jordan's upcoming music video has over 8 terabytes of data that we have to sift through. To back that up, we are saving everything on these rugged Lacy drives. We bought 8 terabyte drives to back it up. So this is definitely something to consider if you're working with any kind of digital media, whether it's video, Photoshop files, any kind of photo management. You're going to want to be able to back it up. So why are we doing this? And that's one of my favorite quotes from 2 Chainz. They ask me what I do and what I do it for, right? The end goal is not to just sell the most. Selling the most doesn't always matter. That might give you some short-term revenue, but the end game, what I want everybody to really set their sights on, is growing the audience. That audience is going to help you leverage the things that you want to do in the future and give you longevity in the game, right? You have rappers like Joe Budden, who definitely had hits that are considerable, right? Definitely was a great artist back when I was listening to a lot of hip hop in high school. But the audience that he grew in that time and over social media helped him leverage a job at Complex doing a show there, and then he built that audience up, and now he's able to do his own podcast, right? So the end game for you to stay in this creative field, right, is to grow an audience. Now, you might not want to do a podcast in the future, but you never know. You always want to have the audience, because if you can go directly to your audience with your product and whatever it is that you want to do that's creative, that's going to be the best way to do it. So you need to start collecting emails, and I'll discuss why. And you need to have one central location that you're directing everybody to. For us, it is our website. Give me a sec, I'll take a sip and we'll move on to that. Excuse me. So, you might have a huge Instagram following, right? Back in my day, we were building up the MySpace following. Now, what happened to MySpace? MySpace eventually collapsed. Now it's, I guess, starting to build back up. But all the work that you put into these external platforms, right? It needs to culminate in something that is long-term, that you always will have access to. This way, in case Facebook gets bought out or sells Instagram, right? All the followers that you had, you need to transfer them over to some place that you're going to be able to contact them and continuously inform them that you have these new products available. So, I will use this opportunity to remind everybody, please sign up for our email list at redplanetrecords.com. And this is what you should be doing too, is building the website, building that central location to point everybody to. This way you could continually communicate with them, okay? So let's speak a little bit about website and domain names. You will need to purchase your domain name, and I'm going to get into how to choose one and what to consider when choosing one. And then you need to purchase a place to actually host that domain. So initially, we used to buy our domain names from GoDaddy, and if you have a high stakes name, something that is going to be really common, it will probably cost you more to buy that domain. By the time that we considered purchasing the Red Planet Records domain, we had actually put a decent amount of work into building up that brand name, plus the word Red Planet, plus the word records together, actually brought up the value of our domain name. And by the time that we went to go purchase it, it actually cost us over $2,000 to buy our domain name, Red Planet Records. So these are things to consider right now, is what is the name going to be for my brand? And is it even available as a domain name? Can I purchase it from somebody else who might be holding it? Because there are people that actually hold these website names, domain names, as stocks almost, right? And different names have different value. Once we purchased the domain name, we were able to build the website using Squarespace. Now, there's other website builders. GoDaddy has its own now, Wix, WordPress, Weebly. I've built a bunch of different sites using some of these, and I have found in my personal experience, Squarespace was the easiest. It does not require you to know any programming. It has a bunch of templates that are really great to jump off from, and then you could slightly alter the designs on them to more fit your needs. And one of the greatest things about them is you could edit your metadata. So metadata is information on each page of your website that you put in. And this is stuff that nobody else sees except for search engines. So you describe each one of your pages. And what you do is you make it very keyword heavy to describe that page, so that hopefully the search engine, when it's scrolling through all the pages of your website, will hopefully understand, oh, okay, this is a page about Red Planet Records. I need to point anytime somebody searches Red Planet Records, I got to direct them to this site. We also did it for my brother Jordan Barone's website. His website is called jordanbarone.com. And what we did was every page of his website in the metadata, we put in the words Jordan Barone multiple times when we were describing the pages. So that plus a couple of other tips, which I'll discuss with you in a second, helped us so that when people search Jordan Barone, he is the first thing that comes up. And eventually he actually got this thing called a histograph, which is when you search usually a person or a company, this thing will come up on the right side of Google, which will help point people to all the different websites related to you. So now, anytime somebody searches in Jordan Barone, Google makes the assumption, oh, okay, they must mean this guy with this website. So this is all called SEO, or search engine optimization, and that's coming up first in Google. So related to SEO is cross-linking with all your social media. So this goes into choosing that name, making sure that name or something similar is available through most of the different social media platforms. Now, do you need to make sure that the name is exact? No. You have people like Drake, who are also known as Champagne Poppy on Instagram, right? But Drake is well established enough that a difference in his Instagram handle versus his websites and other social media does not really affect his brand negatively, right? But if you're just starting out, you want to make sure that they match. So you want to make sure that there's something available across all these platforms and your domain name. So our expert in this field, the person that we went to for advice and learned a lot of this information from, his name is John Sotile. He works with our graphic designer, which is Empirical Designs, which I'll get to in a second, right? So you want to make sure that all your social medias are linking to your website and driving everybody to that main collection site where you want to drive all your fans to. Just in case any of these sites go down or the following diminishes on one of them, you want to make sure that you collected all that information from the website directly. So you're pointing all these websites with links in their headers, in the bios, in the descriptions. We even tag some of our photos, tag them with the website URL, and they all direct back to our website. Another thing to speak about is once they are on the website, something called retargeting and capturing information while people are on the website. So you could add something called pixels to your website. We also have smart URLs that track where you are coming in from, what region you are in, what kind of device you are using. Now, if you're incognito mode, sometimes it protects against that, but this does give us a lot of information. Like we could see, oh, okay, a lot of people do come in from the Google search and from the Google page. Or we see, oh, most of the traffic is coming in through Instagram. So we know we don't have to market on Instagram as much. We can market more and put more of our market dollars on other platforms where we are not as visible. So our expert in this field, his name is Ziggy. He is a good friend of my friend E.T. They both work together, and he helped us establish something called ClickFunnels. So this is the guy that you want to go to. Please check him out. He works for a major PR company, but he also, I believe, offers services as a consultant as well. So speaking about collecting everybody's information and making sure that you have a way to establish contact with them beyond just your regular social media, you want to have a good email list going. So you could directly pay on Google for a domain name extension on your email address. So mine, for instance, is stefan@redplanetrecords.com. That's something that we pay like $5 a month for. Sometimes it even comes free with the domain name that you buy and the hosting. Also, you could set up aliases on your email accounts. So we have an alias, info@redplanetrecords.com. Also, we have our assistant has an alias as well. And they all come into the same inbox so that we could actually all see what's going on and sort the emails a little bit better. There are different email construction, list, and analytic companies. One is called Constant Contact. Another one is called MailChimp. So that's how they make pretty emails with clickable links and pictures in them. And they also track who opened up the email, who's most likely to open it up again. These are all services that do that for you. So Constant Contact and MailChimp. When it comes to branding and making a logo, you have to make sure that your name is available, right? You want to see, is it being used in the same type of industry? If it is, there might be somebody who already holds a trademark to that name. So these are all things to research ahead of time before you pay all this money and set up all these sites and make your logo, right? So our designer for our logo is a company, Empirical Designs. I feel they did an amazing job. We had good customer service with them. And our photographer, who keeps it pretty consistent and makes us look really pretty, is Christine Cruz. She does an excellent job and knows how to work lighting and editing really well. Now, this is kind of our area of expertise. Does not apply to everybody that's creative, but I know that there's a lot of artists and producers that will be watching this, if not already on here. So I'm going to dive slightly into that. Please bear with me as I do that. There are digital distributors, different platforms that you're aware of, right? Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, Tidal. To get onto those platforms, it's really hard to get on yourself, especially if you're just starting out, right? Most people don't have a direct connection to these different platforms, and they don't really want people submitting stuff to them directly because they want to make sure that it is formatted in the correct way. So there are different companies called digital distribution aggregates that help submit your content to these platforms. There's the ones that a lot of people are familiar with: CD Baby, TuneCore, DistroKid does a good job. But the one that Jordan and I chose for our label is called Symphonic Distribution. We really like them because they have great customer service, and they are also what I call the a la carte of digital distribution. You could pick and choose what services you want them for, where other larger companies like a CD Baby and a TuneCore just kind of bunch of different services in it. One, you can't really pick and choose what you want them for. So Symphonic has been really great to us with that. Also, their reporting has been awesome. Their platform is really easy to use when we go in, and we could break it down by song and see by platform where we're getting the most of our sales and our streams from. So I really like their method of reporting. They even have a service to provide advances if you have an upcoming project. So that's why we chose Symphonic Distribution, but it's up to you to do the research and find out which one is going to work for you. We also signed up with them as a label, which allows us to give money directly to our artists without having to receive the money ourselves and then divvy out checks. They do all that for us. So one thing to consider when you're choosing a digital distribution aggregate is whatever songs you put up with them, you're going to have to maintain your relationship with them and your membership with them to keep those songs up. If you ever want to choose or switch from a CD Baby or a TuneCore to another digital distribution aggregate like Symphonic Distribution, that means they're going to rip down your songs at some point. So you want to do the research ahead of time and make sure that you choose one that is going to be for the long term, because it is a big process to get your songs back up. I'm going to check the meet real quick and just see if there's anybody else who wants to join. Okay, so I am going back to our show. So again, whichever one you pick is the one that you are going to have to remain with. So make sure that you do the research ahead of time and know that it is a long-term commitment. I'm not going to get into it today because it's a whole thing in itself, but there are things that they generate for you, like called ISRC codes, which you also want to put in the metadata of your files. And those are going to be the way to track your streams. Also for performance royalties, these are ways that they can track it for you. So you need to learn about ISRC codes. And if you have a physical product or an album, it's called a UPC code, which is a totally different discussion, but something to consider now. Other things to consider in your foundation, right, are your mentors, experts, and overall good dudes and gals, right? These are the people that are going to help you. A lot of people I know are always trying to level up. They're always thinking upwards, like, I need to get my demo to Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z is awesome, but most likely does not care about what you're doing at the level that you're at. You're going to get the most out of people from the same level, and you're going to want to build with them and eventually make it with them. So we have really great people that have helped us along the way. Over here is Hitman, got Jordan his first internship. My mentor, Kalodro. Jordan also did a mentorship program with Young Guru, that's Jay-Z's engineer. We love Miss Mary Almonte. She does influencer marketing. DJ Stacks from Hot 97 has been awesome to us. Also, Richard Barone, no relation as far as family, but he has been really awesome in helping us break down things related to the Grammy Association. And we also love DJ Carmen Sandiego. She was originally managing the studio that Jordan was working at and helped get him a lot of cool placements as an audio engineer. So look at the people that you have around you, start building your team, and when you don't know something, make sure that you're with people that are smarter than you. One of my biggest mistakes early on was not finding experts in the field. So a lot of the things that I've learned have been from people who are just smarter than me in certain areas, right? So that takes us out of our systems and the foundation. We're going to move into the legal protection of IP. And this is the part that everybody seems super concerned with when I speak to them. It's super confusing, and I will let you know this is probably not something that you have to consider right away, but it is good to have in place if you have the time and the money to do it. So let's first speak about the difference between a lot of terms that I know people often get confused with. There are different kinds of legal protections of your intellectual property. There are things called patents, trademarks, and copyrights. The three of those are all different. Patents are more for inventions or brand new ideas that have never been put to paper before. Trademarks are going to be for your name and logo in business, and copyrights are for specific words and images or music that you created. So initially, the people that we went to for help with this were at LegalZoom. But we now have an expert in the field that can help you establish your trademark, even send in copyrights for you if you need help navigating that, and even help you set up a limited liability company. So Julianne Verdi, who also works with Move Forward NY, she does great work out here. That is our recommendation. So let's first speak about trademarks. Do you need this right away? No. But if you eventually want to own your domain name, this is something that you're going to have to look into. So the people that you could apply directly to are the United States Patent and Trademark Office. If you are submitting to any other organization, it is a third-party organization that is charging a fee on top of the normal fees that you would pay to the USPTO. That is just something to be aware of. So you could trademark things like a name, you could trademark things like a logo, and there's different classes that you could submit to. So we currently own trademarks for Jordan Barone, that's for his full name, and for our record label, Red Planet Records, and we are waiting for my name, Stefan Barone. To get these trademarks, you have to submit something called specimens. So you have to prove that you are using these trademarks, these names in business, and that you've been doing it for a while. So something that we were not aware of initially when we had our album art and our digital store where you could purchase our MP3s from our website, we did not think to put our trademark name, which is Red Planet Records, on the actual album art. But if we had put it earlier, we would have had specimens even earlier to prove that we were using this name in commerce. So these are things to consider. Let's say you're a painter or film. You want to make sure that you can prove that you were using this in business very early on, and you want to document it well. Copyrights are something that are going to be related to almost everybody in this meet or who might be watching it who is doing something creative. Now, the thing about copyrights is you own it as soon as you create it in a tangible form. So as soon as you make that music, as soon as you film that film, as soon as you paint that painting, you technically own it. The problem is to enforce it and to prove that you own it, you need to register it. That is probably the best way to protect against your intellectual property. I've heard this before, and I used to do this myself and think that it was a good form of protection. I used to mail myself a CD. That is not a good form of protection because for that to hold up in court, you would have to prove that nobody had tampered with that CD or opened it. And that's a pretty hard liability to prove in court. So the best way is to submit directly to copyright.gov. And copyright.gov is the only website that is submitting it to the Library of Congress for actual registration. Anything else is a third party again, and they're charging a fee on top of the fee that they normally charge. So that's directly at copyright.gov. So copyrights protect things like books, film, TV programs, songs, recording, painting, even like pictures for architecture, right? These are all things that you could submit copyright protections for. Now, again, I am most related to music, so I know the most about these copyrights. There are two kinds: performing arts copyrights and sound recording copyrights. And this is where I tend to find the most confusion when I speak to artists and songwriters and producers, right? When you're thinking of your song, to think about it in business terms, you need to start thinking of these two separate things as their own entities. Even though it's one song, you need to start thinking in terms of the PA copyright and the sound recording copyright. So let's get into what the difference is between the two. The performing arts copyright, or PA copyright, refers to the musical composition and the lyrics. There is no distinction between the two. So it doesn't matter who wrote the lyrics, doesn't matter who made the beat, right? Once it's a song, it is saying that you own it equally unless you have some kind of agreement together saying this person made 20% and the other person had 80%. So no distinction between lyrics and musical composition or whoever was in the room and contributed to the work. So this is sometimes referred to as publishing. This is a little bit confusing when you really start getting to the nuances of who owns what, because there are people called publishers. There's something called publishing administration. So I don't like referring to it as the publishing, but a lot of people do refer to it as the publishing. But they're merely talking about the performance arts copyright. Typically, these PA copyrights are owned by the songwriters and publishers. Usually the publishers own most of it, especially in major artists' shares. It's usually the publisher who's going to own the largest portion of it. And these are made by agreements. If there's no agreement in place, it's owned by everybody equally. Does not matter if you just said, hey, I like that snare. You could technically argue in court that you had just as much of a contribution to that work. Now, we're going to go into the SR copyright, or the sound recording. This is sometimes referred to as the masters. So, the PA copyright, or the musical composition, is separate from the actual sound recording of it. Now, a good way to think of this is there could only be one PA copyright for every song, but there could be multiple sound recordings of that song. So one song that is maybe familiar to everybody is the song Tainted Love. There are multiple versions of that song. Also, Mary J. Blige's It's Going Down, or I'm Going Down, right? That was originally a song in the 70s, but she made her own sound recording of it. She could not file for a PA copyright because it's only the original person who made that musical composition and those lyrics. But she made her own sound recording of it, so she could file for an SR copyright. These SR copyrights are typically owned by the artists and the record labels. So let's get into a distinction between the two. Songwriters are not always the artists, and publishers are not always the label. These are usually two separate things to represent the two different sides to a song. So artists like Selena Gomez does not always write her own songs. Taylor Swift does not always write her own songs, right? The songwriters would probably own some portion of the PA copyright, and the artist would own some portion of the sound recording. Also, traditionally, publishers and labels are set up as different entities. Now, at the independent label, usually the labels have some subdivision that does the publishing. At the major labels, they usually have their own publishing chapter or company. So a label like Warner, right, also has its own publishing division, Warner Chappell. It's important to understand that there's a distinction between both. A lot of people are trying to get signed as an artist, but they forget you could also get signed as a songwriter to a publisher. And that's because of this distinction between PA and SR copyrights. By the way, write your questions in the chat, or you can write it on the IG Live. I'm going to go through it later, and I'll try to answer all questions at the end of this presentation. So that speaks a little bit about some of the IP protections. Also, kind of in this discussion, going back to trademark, this relates to your company. So setting up something like a LLC, or limited liability company, this is something to consider Do you have to do it right away? No. But if you're going to be spending a lot of money initially, especially even just to set up your domain name and the hosting, all the money that you spend, you could actually write off of your taxes. So Jordan, my younger brother, and I, we chose to set up our record label as an LLC. And every year, if we have a loss, we could actually write that off of our personal income and we don't get taxed as much. The LLC also helps protect, let's say somebody decides to come after one of our songs and says, hey, that song is really similar to ours. This helps us protect against that, where they could only come after the LLC's assets and not our personal assets. Okay, so LLCs are something to consider. Again, Miss Verdi is excellent at helping out independent artists and businesses set up LLCs as well. So we're going to move forward. In our agenda next, we're talking about revenue streams, so the different ways that you are making money. I am going to relate it mostly to music, but it can be related to other creative areas. So something that's really important to do early on that I didn't think to do initially when I was setting up the business was to just brainstorm and think about every possible way you can make money, right? For a musician or an artist, your initial things are like, oh, okay, I'm going to sell music. But there are so many other ways to make money. Even just sharing information, the things that you've learned, could be a whole other stream of income for you. This is free, and I like offering this information for free, but this is stuff that I could potentially get paid for just by sharing this information. So remember, you're not just going to make money just from selling your art, selling your music. There's going to be other ways. You could teach what you do. You could also get paid for appearances. If you build up your audience, there are so many more opportunities that will be available to you. Someone like my brother, who only had 20,000 followers, again, very modest, is getting offers to take pictures in front of different businesses and, just express that he enjoys going there, right? So these little things will actually open up bigger opportunities. So that's why I said the main goal should be to build the audiences, right? Now, let's get into the specifics of how the copyrights make money. The performing arts copyright makes money through mechanical royalties, performance royalties, synchronization licenses, and other. A lot of you have already heard these terms, but many of you, when I speak to different artists, don't really understand what these are or how to collect them or when you're owed these things. So again, the PA copyright is talking about the composition, which is the musical component and the lyrics together. The mechanical royalties are owed to the PA copyright owners by anybody who is creating a mechanical reproduction of the work. Traditionally, that used to mean for CDs, that was a mechanical reproduction, so the record label would owe mechanical royalties to the songwriters and publishers for the mechanical reproduction of the composition. Now, in today's terms, it was actually argued, and you could actually thank Taylor Swift and a bunch of other artists who fought for this. They argued that somebody like Spotify, where you could actually choose which song you're listening to, you basically have on-demand streaming services. They argued that those are actual mechanical reproductions of the composition because the listener gets to choose what they're listening to. So because they argued that and they've won that battle, we are now owed mechanical royalties from all these streaming services that allow the user to pick their song on demand, right? I think I just got another person joining. Let me just make sure I let them in. And I'm going back to here. Okay. So, mechanical royalties are owed by anybody who's making a mechanical reproduction of the composition, and those streaming platforms are making mechanical reproductions. Now, are you getting mechanical royalties from your digital distribution aggregate? No, not unless you set up something called publishing admin or you have some other service collecting it for you. So this does not come inherently just from streaming. The next thing we'll talk about are performance royalties. So I think it's best to bring this up right now because a lot of people are like, yeah, I set up my ASCAP, I set up my BMI, I'm good. That's awesome. You should set up with one of these performance royalty collection organizations that are usually very well known, like ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC. You should definitely be setting up with one of them, but that's not the whole picture. That's not everything. So let's talk about what a performance of your composition is. Performance is not just the traditional performance, live performance. This is anytime your song is broadcast. So this is speaking about terrestrial radio here in America. This is speaking about your song playing at a cafe or at any live venue. And what these performance royalty collection organizations do is basically collect a bunch of fees from different venues. They sue on behalf of songwriters from these venues when they are not paying fees. And they collect membership fees from different songwriters and publishers. All that money goes into a pot. And then they sample a bunch of different venues and radio stations and other places that are doing public performances or broadcasts of your composition. And they determine, okay, based on these samples, Justin Timberlake got 12% of the airplay, and somebody like Stefan Barone got 0.012% of the airplay, right? So out of all the money that they collected and put in a pot, they now divvy up that money and give out performance royalties. So they are collecting it on your behalf. And these organizations were actually appointed by the government to collect it for you and give it out to protect songwriters. Okay? There are also mechanical royalty collection agencies like the Harry Fox Agency and Music Reports that are collecting it directly from these streaming platforms. So, do you have to be registered with each one of these? It would help, but it is difficult to register with places like HFA and Music Reports. So sometimes you set up something called a publishing administrator, which we'll talk about in probably the next slide. Last, I want to talk about synchronization licenses. So synchronization happens anytime your music or your composition is set to some kind of a video. So this happens when it's in a movie, maybe on a TV show, some kind of program. You are getting paid in synchronization licenses. Most of the time, they're negotiating directly with you to set up these synchronization licenses and pay to the songwriters and publishers. Last form of revenue, I just consider as other. So this is if your album art is printed on a t-shirt. Wouldn't really be the composition, but let's say the lyrics were printed on a t-shirt or on some kind of poster, right? That would be owed to the songwriters. And that's what I consider other revenue. So, I was speaking about publishing administration. Now, a lot of the digital distribution aggregates like CD Baby and TuneCore, they have their own publishing admin services that they offer. I suggest and I recommend looking into how they split up the publishing. A lot of times the way that these publishing admins set it up is they collect the whole publisher side from these performance and mechanical royalties, and they give you most of your songwriter's side, right? So it's up to you to research which one is going to be best for you. But give me 1 second. I'm sorry. There are other publishing admins, and the one that Jordan and I chose is called SongTrust, and they are collecting not only the performance royalties for you, but also mechanical royalties. Now, the ones that I'm speaking about are all considered domestic, so here in the USA. There are organizations in every single country that collect these performance and mechanical royalties for you on your behalf. So you could either individually set up with each one of these, or you could go with somebody like a SongTrust who takes a small percentage to go and set up your membership on all these different organizations and then divvy out that money to you. One other thing I want to add is in other countries, usually the performance and mechanical royalties are all one organization. They're collecting both of these on your behalf. So setting up with somebody like a SongTrust, especially at these beginning stages, if you're just starting out as an artist, this is definitely going to save you a lot of time. You don't have the time to register for over 100 different countries and different organizations. So somebody like SongTrust would be really helpful, and this was actually recommended to us by our digital distribution aggregate, Symphonic. That is who they use as well. Let's talk about how the sound recording makes money. So, These are probably the traditional things that most people think of when they think of music making money. The sales, so the actual sale of your physical album or your MP3, the streaming. So this is what is usually paid directly to the digital distribution aggregate. Another way that they make money is through master use licensing. So the same way that we had the synchronization license, where the songwriters and publishers get paid for their composition, if let's say a TV program uses the sound recording as well, then they also owe something called a master use license. So they usually negotiate directly with the label or the artist to offer some form of compensation for the master use. Last is the non-interactive digital streaming. So this relates to streaming platforms like a Pandora, where the user does not get to choose what song they are playing. So if it's non-interactive, or something like a Sirius XM, that is collected, those performance royalties for the sound recording are collected by an organization called Sound Exchange. So I know there's a lot of confusion as to who collects what and who pays who, but hopefully that cleared it up for you a little bit. And again, if you have questions in the chat, please put them in there or on the IG Live. All right. There's also confusion between sampling and covering a song. So to have a song be considered a cover, it must maintain all the original elements of the song. That means if it went verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, it has to be exactly like that in the cover. And it must maintain most of the original elements and melodies of the song. That is the only way you could get away with it being called a cover, in which case you would owe the PA, Performing Arts copyright owners. But if you made your own recording of it, you would not owe the SR copyright owners. Any changes that you're going to make to it are considered a derivative work. Okay? So if you are sampling just one element of a song, let's say the drums or the melody, and then you're using that in your own work, that's considered a derivative work. Now, I've heard a lot of different things like, oh, if you only use 4 bars or only do 12 seconds. Nope. It has been argued in court and proved many, many times again that if you are sampling, even if you're replaying elements of it, it usually holds up in court, and the original owners of that usually get some compensation from it. Some big cases that you might know are Led Zeppelin, When the Levee Breaks. A lot of people want to use those drums, and they've successfully gone after everybody who has sampled even just a kick drum. And they were able to prove that that kick drum came from their sound recording. Other cases that you might have heard are Blurred Lines, right? Marvin Gaye's estate was able to successfully go after Robin Thicke and Pharrell and say, hey, even though this was played over, most of the notes that are being played are very similar to Marvin Gaye's original work. Now, some ways to get around not having to pay everybody, right, is if you sample just the composition and the lyrics, just the actual composition, you only need permission and have to compensate the PA owners. If you're also sampling the actual sound recording, then you're going to owe both the PA owners and the SR owners. So there's actually some services that will replay something that you want to sample so that you only owe the PA owners. By the way, these are some classic sampling machines. This is actually the newer version of it. That's the SP1200 and the ASR10. All right, related to this, that I felt was relevant to throw into this, but this could be a whole webinar in itself, is playlist promo. So some of the experts that are really excelling past us in navigating this whole other universe, right? If you're familiar with the artist from Staten Island, Mig718, his management team is Mike Loco Entertainment. They have really traversed this well and learned how to navigate successful playlist promotion and really been able to get Mig's song out there with a ton of streams and really quality streams. So we're going to talk about that. So a lot of people do pay for playlist promotion. I will make no illusions. We have ourselves for Jordan's single. So the things to consider is, why are you doing this playlist promotion in the first place? Are you trying to gain new listeners that you would not have access to? Then maybe it is worth it. And if that is what you're trying to gain, then you're probably not going to break even as far as streaming and performance royalties, right? But you are being exposed to a whole new fan base. So you have to make that determination. Is this even worth it for you? Some other things to consider is, how many people are following the playlist that you are pitching to? And if you're about to pay for promotion on that playlist, do they even have a lot of followers? Are those followers paid listeners, or are they free listeners? Because you get paid differently based on that. How many songs are on that playlist? If it's a playlist of over 600 people, 600 songs, then it might not be worth it to be on that playlist, because you might only get played once if a listener goes through the whole playlist. How often is that playlist updated? Are you going to stay on there for just a day or for 3 months? That is something to consider as well. Where in this playlist will your song be? Are you going to be the first one that people get to listen to, or are you way down the list, number 125, right? These are things to consider. So somebody who's making really good organic connections to playlist curators, like I said, is Mike Loco from Mike Loco Entertainment, and that's our go-to guy. So we've now mentioned a couple of revenue streams, but it's up to you to be creative in how you're going to gain money for your creative business. And the end goal, obviously, I hope that you make millions, but it should also be to just make a living just from your passion alone, right? So if you're doing that, to me, I believe that's successful. So some other considerations. Where can you learn some of the things that I'm speaking about and really dive into the nuances of each of these? YouTube is awesome. I love For Dummies books. They have For Dummies on social media marketing, For Dummies on home recording, right? That really help us understand what we needed to buy for our home studio. There are For Dummies books on everything. There are free workshops that you could attend. Projectivity hosts a lot of them. I'm doing one now, right? If you're joining us, then you know enough to look for these free workshops. Local libraries host free workshops. And there's also tons of places to get internships. I gotta take a sip. Give me 1 sec. Okay. So, initially, when I knew nothing about studios, before the days of YouTube and Google, but back then I think we just had like Ask Jeeves, and Lycos was another search engine. I had to learn directly how to build a studio and what equipment I would actually need by, one, going to the actual physical stores and asking somebody, and two, I got an internship at probably one of the largest studios locally here in Staten Island called Phoenix, right? I went there initially, and I was like 12 years old, and I told them I wanted an internship, and they said, "Get out of here, kid, you're too young. I don't want you in the studio. There's people that do drugs here and smoke weed. You can't be here. Get out." So I went back home. I told my mother, "Oh, they told me I'm too young." And she said, "No, go back there and you ask them for an internship." So I went back a second time. I said, "Hey, I really want an internship. I want to learn how to record people." And they told me, "Nope, you're too young. Go home." So I went home, and again, I told my mother, "No, they really said I couldn't get an internship there." And she said, "No, go back again." On the third time, I went there, and I said, "Look, I really want an internship." And finally, I think they were just so annoyed that they said, "Okay, fine, but don't bother me. Don't ask any questions. You sit right on that couch, and you can watch what I'm doing, but I don't want any questions." So I said, "Okay, fine, no problem." I agreed to that. And of course, I asked more questions, and little by little, they saw that I worked hard, and I got to learn the basics of recording. So internships were definitely a great way to get my foot in the door and learn what I needed to learn. Also, I interned for Columbia Records, and I was in the A&R department. I got to see how it works in a major record label and how they make their decisions. And that helped me understand, okay, all this stuff goes into it. There's radio promotion, all these things that I need to consider if I'm ever going to have my own independent record label. So I highly suggest internships the way to go. Learn on the job, right? Mac Pro Video. I said this before. I love all of their courses. They have courses on all the different programs. So whether you want to do Pro Tools, Ableton, Fruity Loops, they have full courses, beginner and expert, to go through. So that's a subscription service that I pay for. Really cheap when you consider how much knowledge they are providing. And also the book that I recommended in the beginning, All You Need to Know About the Music Business. Definitely a great entry point. Definitely a lot of the legal terms that I was confused about or unfamiliar with helped me get more information on them. Networking, workshops, and panels. These are definitely another great way to go in and hear a lot of the practical applications of the knowledge that you're building. So of course, I love Projectivity. They're always holding good webinars and different sessions and activities to learn more about your craft. The Digilog is a huge resource that treats us really well, and where I know a lot of independent artists have made really lasting connections with industry professionals. So I am highly recommending the Digilog's events. We love going to them. They host really informative events as well. Like, I learn a ton by going to them, and we actually get to meet with a bunch of different sponsors there too. Sennheiser has been a major sponsor. We work for a lot of their events, so this is the place to go. Please register for their events. Check out the Digilog. Also, some other nonprofits that Projectivity works with is Building Beats. They are based out of Brooklyn, and they've hosted some really great events as well. I've gotten to meet really cool artists like Marlon Craft, who's doing his thing. So Building Beats is another place that I recommend. They also do a lot of work with Fool's Gold, so that's cool. Every once in a while you get to see A-Track pass by. Then, one of the great places to check out a lot of the gear. If you're into audio engineering and recording, there's AES, but there are a ton of conventions based on whatever industry you are into. So if you're into photography, I know that there are a ton of different conventions related to photography. Also for YouTubers, different social media influencers, they have their own conventions as well. So please research, check what conventions you can go to, and meet more of the professionals in your industry. There are also a ton of free resources and money out there for your craft. And we were the lucky recipients, and we still owe them our projects. So Staten Island Arts, I see you. We have some great projects coming, I promise. We were the lucky recipients of some grants. So Jordan received a grant for his project, which he is still working on, and I received a grant as well. So thank you very much to Staten Island Arts, and we know we owe you some projects, so I am shouting you out. They had a ton of great events as well, and they host a bunch of different local events. Some other things to consider: if you're into film or you want some access to some free recording equipment, there are public access stations, usually in every location. Out here in Staten Island, where I work and live, we have CTV. I know in Brooklyn they have BCAT. Manhattan has its own public access station, and a lot of states also have it. There's usually a Department of Cultural Affairs for every state. In New York, it's called the Department of Cultural Affairs, and they receive a lot of the grant money and then divvy it out to local organizations like a Staten Island Arts, and that's where a lot of these grants come from. Sometimes it comes from federal money, sometimes it comes from state funds, but you should be looking into what grants are available related to your institution of art or your creative endeavors. The grant that my brother and I received are called the DCA Premier Grant. So it's for artists that have never received a grant before, and the only stipulation was that we have to perform our work at a handicap accessible venue, which is something that is actually really easy to do for the amount that we got. So please look into all the grants that are available that could help you really take your project to the next level. The other thing I want to say is partner with different local venues. We have a really great venue out here, Hub 17. Amendment 18 also has been really helpful in putting together different events. Projectivity has its own project lab, right? So look into the local venues and how you could host different events related to your art. Eventually, for Jordan's debut project, we're going to hold pizza parties at some of these local venues and also throughout the city. So we're definitely going to be we're definitely going to be partnering with places like Project Lab and Hub 17 to host some of these parties and hopefully bring in some income for them as well. So that concludes our webinar, and I'm going to make my way to answering some of the questions and then hopefully doing some consults up until about 5 p.m. Are we at 5? No, good. We're at 4:10. I went a little bit over, but hopefully you found the information useful. So I ask you, please follow us. Again, my name is Stefan Barone. The record label is Red Planet Rex. Projectivity is the nonprofit that's hosting this, and their physical location is Project Lab. Also, check out my brother. He's pretty cool, has some good music. So that's Jordan Barone _. So I will keep this up, and I will make my way to the chat. All right. Nothing in the chat, so let's go over to Instagram Live while I keep this up. In Instagram Live, do we have any questions? No, just a bunch of people join. Okay, any comments?
That you need to drink some water.
I need to drink some water. Cool. All right, so I'm going to hang out probably for one more minute. I will look through to see if there's any questions. And then if not, we hope everybody enjoyed. Please, again, follow, and thank you for joining us today. Shout out, Lil Mex is on here. We love Little Mex beats. Little Mex actually interned with Jordan and is now doing his thing. He has some really great beats, so shout out to Little Mex. I see Dave is in here as well. That's awesome. And shout out to everybody who's helped us in the past. Thank you to Colodro. Thank you, Making Memories. Thank you to Island Entertainment, to Joe, to everybody who's provided their services to us. Audrey, Day. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all your help in building this so far, and we hope that you'll continue with us in the future. Thank you, Projectivity, for hosting it with us as well. And with that, I think we are going to conclude.